Hi, my name is Meredith Riley. I am doing a presentation on domestic violence and intimate partner violence. In this, we will be talking about the title states, and because of this, there's a trigger warning just because for some people it might be hard to listen to. In this slide, we'll be talking about what domestic violence is. So there are many types, and the first one would be physical abuse. This is the one that's probably most commonly known. This can include anything from hitting, biting, slapping, shoving, punching, pulling hair, burning, cutting, or really any type of pain inflicted. While this is the most commonly known type, this is not necessarily the most common form of domestic violence. Sexual abuse is the second type. This can just be coercing sex or attempting to have sex with someone to actually raping the victim. The most common form of sexual abuse is marital rape, which would be rape from a husband or wife to their significant other. But another form of sexual abuse could even just be making jokes at the other's expense. This is still a form of abuse. The next type would be emotional abuse. This is the most common type to happen in any domestic violence situation. This can start off with just invalidating the victim's feelings, making them feel worthless. It can be criticism, yelling, or interfering with other relationships, such as saying, I don't want you to be friends with them, I don't want you to hang out with them. And overall, this just isolates the victim. It makes them feel like they don't have anyone else they can go to because the one person who is bringing them down is typically the one who also tries to somehow build them back up. For example, it could be, I don't think you should be friends with them, but I'm here for you. So it makes them feel like they can't go to their friend, but they can go to their significant other. The next form of abuse is economic abuse. In this one, the abuser will try and control the victim financially. They might just be the ones in control of the money, so the victim does not even have access to their money. Another would be not letting the victim work or go to school to get educated, in which case they have to really rely on the abuser to support them. The next would be psychological abuse. In this one, the abuser will use fear and intimidation to isolate the victim. This could be something as simple as threatening to kill themselves or hurt themselves, being like, hey, if you try to leave, I'm gonna hurt myself. Or it could be, if you try to leave, I'm gonna hurt your kids. I'm gonna hurt your pet. I'm gonna burn down the house. This one is not necessarily abusing the victim themselves, but threatening everything else in their life. This makes it so they feel like they cannot leave because if something were to happen to their friends or family or like house or something, it would make it their fault for trying to leave. The next form is just threats, and this is just like hitting or injuring or the use of weapons. This is a type of psychological abuse. The next would be stalking, which would be following, spying, harassing the victim. It can also be something like sending gifts or constantly calling the victim. This typically starts off as legal stuff that could be seen by some people as being friendly, and then will typically escalate into illegal stalking issues. And the last one would be cyber stalking, which is similar to stalking, but mainly just through the internet, through the use of texting, apps, calling, stuff like that. Who can be a victim? Well, anyone can be a victim in the couple. It's most commonly a husband abusing a wife, or a husband abusing their husband. The other two combinations are not as commonly heard of, but still happen. These are when a wife abuses a husband, or if a wife abuses their wife. If a wife abuses their husband, the husband is less likely to speak up about it just because people might not believe them, it's embarrassing, and just the way society views a man getting abused by their wife. Reporting domestic violence can get very complicated and messy. There are many ways to go about doing this, but just remember that only about 50% of all cases are even reported, and even less of them go through. So most people, if they're going to report, they will start off by documenting when each incident happens and trying to write down the witnesses and all this stuff. The documentation is very important for police because they need evidence. They cannot just throw someone in jail on your word. The next would be getting a safety plan in place and packing an emergency bag if you need to run. After you do that, if you are injured, you should go to a hospital. If you aren't, then you can call a domestic violence hotline or emergency services. If you don't feel comfortable doing either of those, talk to a friend or a loved one because they might be able to help you or get a hold of someone who can. After that, if you're able to go to the police, then you can ask to get a restraining order or a safe house, or really just getting away from your abuser. This is very important because as soon as the abuser finds out you're trying to report them, in most cases, they will try to go after you. And that can get very dangerous, obviously. A very common question asked to the victims is, why didn't you just leave? This can be because of many different reasons. Some of them are the abuser is threatening their loved ones, threatening their children, pets, family members, friends, whatever it is, they're threatening someone, so it makes it feel like the victim cannot leave because, people are getting threatened. The next is that they don't have any money. If they are being economically abused, then they don't have enough money to actually leave, and they might end up having to go back to their abuser anyways. The next one is that they might just not have anyone to go to, and if you're trying to get away from your abuser, you'll probably need somewhere to stay, and if you don't have any place to go, then you can't exactly leave. Another is you don't feel safe. If you don't feel safe enough to leave, it might not be worth the risk, because if you can't leave and stay away, then overall you could get very injured or even killed by your abuser. And the last one is you don't have any evidence. If you're trying to report your abuser and that's how you're trying to leave, if you don't have enough evidence, it's not going to matter, and your abuser will be able to go and hunt you down if they want, and that will not end well either. Here are some statistics on domestic violence. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men are severely injured in a domestic violence situation. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men suffer from physical abuse in any marriage. 1 in 15 children are exposed to domestic violence. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men are stalked. 1 in 10 women, and there's no data for men, are raped. 20,000 calls are made to domestic violence hotlines every single day in the US. 34% of injuries from domestic violence get the correct medical attention they need, whereas the rest go untreated. 15% of all crime is domestic violence. And finally, the rate of domestic violence is the same in heterosexual couples as LGBTQ+ couples. Societal views and opposing arguments. While there are not exactly any opposing arguments for domestic violence, society does have an interesting way of viewing it. For example, male and female victims. Female victims are more likely to be taken seriously than males. If a male is being abused by their wife, they will most of the time not be believed. They can be told to man up, get control of her, laughed at, or even asked why they don't want her in the case of sexual abuse. This causes a lot of problems for male victims. They feel like they can't come forward and have a hard time leaving an abusive relationship. Another example is domestic violence shelters. 90% of shelters are for women, not men, and nearly 80% of those won't even let a man in because it can be triggering or dangerous for women. While this is understandable on the side of the women, it's not good for men. They have less places that they can go, and these are just two differences in the treatments of male and female victims. Discussion question. As stated in a previous slide, males who receive domestic violence from their partner have a hard time coming forward and being taken seriously. What is a solution to help them feel like they can come forward if they are being abused? How can we, as a society, help them be taken more seriously by authorities? And finally, what are some ideas to improve the overall system of domestic violence in association to the difference in treatment of men and women abused? Here are the references. Thank you for watching.